Three, two, one.
Let's go!
I am the host of the Permian Basin Experience podcast, Troy Tittlemeyer, and I'm joined by none other, of course, Matt the Skip Scipione. What's up, man?
What's going on? Dude, the family's back together.
Yeah, that's right,
How's the dream team doing?
The dream team is back up and running, man. I've been 2 weeks without him. It's crazy. The baby, over 2 weeks span, she just grows so much. It's wild.
You're there every day with her, right? Every single step is basically being documented in her brain. And then all of a sudden, 2 week gap.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, wow, I miss so much.
It took her a second, about a minute almost. It felt like her just looking, she kind of eyeballing me, sizing me up, and then she was just like, it was dad.
Yeah,
you know
this is the man's.
Lit up for minutes, and so it's good, man. It's good to have him back. I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold, but no, it's good, man. We got good shows coming up. We got good things coming up. You're going off to Europe.
Going off to Europe, man.
Come on, dude.
The full-blown family reunion.
Come on.
It's going to be a good time.
I'm Netherlands, excited. Right?
Yeah, the Netherlands,
Wow.
a little Germany, a little bit of Belgium. And then,
what the hell, dude?
It's nice when you have, when you're a mutt and you just got family everywhere, dude.
What an education you're going to get, man.
Dude, I can't wait. I really can't wait. But this show, pretty excited about.
Dude, first time with a camera.
So we're PBE, we're technologically advanced.
Yep.
Right? We're up to date. We're following what the kids want. And the kids demanded video.
That's it. We wanted cameras in the room. We got it. We can record everything on the TV now, and for this show that we brought in, the first one, Rebecca Dodge, PhD, structural geologist out of Colorado School of Mines, did imagery, satellite, and all that stuff, working structural geology through imagery for Exxon. Just goes through the whole thing, man.
Yeah, and does a deep dive into the Arkoma Basin and looking at imagery on the surface and these pre-existing structural models.
Yeah.
And she even saying, you guys have it wrong. Like, they're doing these super basic cross-sections through here. They're missing the juiciest reservoirs because of it. And then she's just talking about, no. You got the back thrust. You know, we got these thrust sheets just ramping on top of one another.
Yeah,
and
but that back thrust was really, pretty wild. And then when she lined it all out and puts the thrust patterns together, you're going, wow, you could really see it.
And they have this 2D line through there.
Yep.
And looks super, super questionable. But there's enough detail in there that she was able to, once she correlated it to that Landsat data, it was just like, it just started to pop, right? These little subtle features that you're like, that's a cool little blob. And you're like, oh, wait, that's a thrust sheet.
And then we went live in the Texas Watershed viewer, where we just drove around the Permian Basin. We got to look at all that stuff. It was badass.
It was, man.
Saw basically the edge of the Central Basin platform on a surface feature.
That's how I'm assuming it was mapped.
Yeah.
Originally, it was just, hey, look,
maybe,
you have this defined line on the surface of the earth.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not a lot of topographic relief, but with Landsat data, it's enough to know that there's a feature there, that this is different than that.
And then that large feature that was off in probably the Midland Basin, I'm guessing, or maybe that was Valverde Basin, but that she was like, it's a slight dog leg. You see that kind of vertical feature she pointed out? She's like, that's probably a high angle normal fault, like a deep basement high. I'm going, what the hell? That's all over the Permian.
Yeah,
and a bunch of those faults.
But then now you see where all the wells are drilled, and you're like,
one side of the fault.
One side of the fault drilled up. Other side of the fault, there's like one well.
Yeah,
it's like,
work over here.
You lost.
Yeah, it was. I mean, just a great show, man. Overall, like the best we could do, I think, as far as our first show, bringing in cameras and following along the presentation.
And then just kind of wrapping it all up, talking about youth education and geosciences and the future for even people younger than us, right?
Yep.
How are we going to inspire more kids, People aren't getting taught earth science, and she's making an effort through the local societies to get earth science into high school. So
AAPG's backing her. They're getting teachers taught, bring up earth science and offer that to high schools, offer that to middle schools. That's going to be huge. huge to be in high school and learn about geoscience and be like, wow, that's a career.
Other step out from the biology, chemistry, physics. I mean, they're foundational, right?
Right.
So is the Earth.
That's right. Let's apply some of that and make some sense of this.
Yeah, you learned about your periodic table. Let's talk about the real world now.
And let's just talk about that for a second, because applying the fundamentals of science to the Earth and the processes of Earth today is the most fun you could possibly have as a scientist. Like,
oh yeah,
you're not going to have more fun. You're not going to have more fun than applying it to the Earth, man, and trying to make sense of this thing. There's no possible way.
Come up with the story. Be the romantic.
Dude, be the romantic, man. I love it. So yeah, we're completely supportive of that, and that was really awesome to see that she was getting after that.
Without any further ado,
Rebecca Dodge, we are going to start the conception segment of the Permian Basin Experience podcast. And to start the conception segment, we have to bring in one of our primary sponsor of the show, which is TGS. And TGS provides well and production data throughout the whole country. They have the largest LES digital database, and they also have a massive amount of spec shoot seismic data. They just have all the data you need when you come up with a conceptual play, right? You come up with an idea. Where do you need to start? You need to start with data. You got to get downhole data. You got to get that into a database, and that's what TGS provides. So we can't thank them enough for being a primary sponsor of the show, and we want to just give them a shout out for that.
Yeah, believing in us.
Yeah,
and let's go from here, boys. Let's go from here.
With that being said, Rebecca Dodge, you are a PhD, a structural geologist out of the Colorado School of Mines.
Yes.
That is impressive. All in itself.
Yeah.
We don't even need the presentation.
Yeah, the presentation, I mean, that could just be it. I mean, we can just go down that rabbit hole.
You just walk around and impress people without even saying anything.
Well, I don't know about that.
What was it like? I mean, master's degree, PhD.
Well, both my master's and PhD are from Colorado School of Mines, and I was looking at structures out in northwestern Nevada, specifically active faults. And so I was looking at the sort of rifting that's going on out there. And at that I ended up studying the seismicity and the occurrence of earthquakes out there. And there have been some very large earthquakes out there, so I was able to determine the size of the earthquakes that had occurred over the past 25,000 years, how many earthquakes had occurred. Cool. And they were also controlling hot springs. Boiling hot springs were coming up to the surface along the Black Rock Fault, which I did my PhD on. And that was a time when the oil companies were first beginning to get interested in geothermal back in the late 70s. And they gave up on it, and now they're sort of going back towards it. But, there was a lot of interest. And I was also using imagery to map the faults, because the maps up there were, the biggest maps I had were 1 to 250,000. And the fault that I studied, the Black Rock Fault, was 60 kilometers long. Whoa. It had never been put on a geologic map before. It had never been mapped.
Whoa.
What?
That's really cool.
Yeah. This is 115 miles north of Reno.
And what's the age of the Black Rock Fault?
The Black Rock Fault is, it's probably the basin itself started forming around 10 million years ago. I studied the last 25,000 years of offset along the fault, and it has thrown off about 5 to 7 earthquakes in the past 25,000 years.
Wow.
Which, if you live in Reno, you should really be aware of.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
Wake up, Reno.
Yeah, I was terrified actually that it would have a fault while I was there, and that people would blame me. Like, I was trenching.
You show up and you study this, and then all of a sudden the earth starts shaking.
I made it happen. I was trenching the fault with a backhoe. And so, I was actually digging into the fault, across the fault scarp, and everybody knew it.
So how does that work? Do you go through the school and you say, hey, I'm going to rent a backhoe and trench the fault? And was there any prior safety regulations at the time, or was it just drive to Home Depot and just go to town?
Well, we just got somebody who dug ditches, and I actually had a grant from the U.S. Geological Survey. Oh, cool. And you've heard of Burning Man?
Yeah.
It's in the Black Rock Desert. So this I was there before Burning Man. There was just this
you
hippie
started
festival.
Burning Man?
Well, no. But I was there at an early version of it when I was doing my field work. But, we got somebody to help us find somebody who had backhoes to dig ditches. And we dug big trenches across the fault. Wow. And we were able to date the offset and see how much it had been offset each time it moved. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of fun. And I was out there for 5 months when I was doing my PhD, living in a town that had a population of 90.
Wow, you knew them all.
Yeah, I knew them all. It had a population of 90. There was one gas station, no grocery store, and 5 bars. So
yep.
It was a nice place.
I'm sure everyone really knew each other then.
Solid ratio.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it was a good ratio.
Did you ever go in the hot springs?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the hot springs, they had the hot springs near Gerlach, which is a little town I lived in, and they had sort of engineered it so that they had drilled a cold water well, and they had the hot spring pool, which was boiling, and they ran cold water and had a mixing pool that you could bathe in. And I mean literally bathe. People, sheep herders and ranchers and everything, they would come in and they would get in there with their shampoo and they would take a bath in the hot springs.
There you go.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what's the temperature of that water coming out of the fault? 94
degrees centigrade.
Almost boiling.
Wow.
Literally, at that altitude, it was bubbling.
What the heck?
And
Any mud volcanoes?
There were tufa towers.
Towers,
where they would precipitate. Mm-hmm. They had actually drilled a well north of Gerlach in a place called Fly Ranch, and they had abandoned the well, but it was leaking, and it built up a huge calcium carbonate tufa tower. And it's kind of, you can see it in National Geographic, just had a picture of it recently.
Would that fault happen to correlate to Mono Lake in some way?
It's a similar type of geology. Mono Lake, I think, is in one of those grabens. Mm-hmm. And just south, like the Black Rock Desert goes down into the Smoke Creek, goes down into Pyramid Lake, which is kind of like Mono Lake. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mono Lake has hot springs that come up in it. I mean, Pyramid Lake. Mm-hmm. And it had built tufa towers up out of the lake.
That's fascinating. Yeah, you're getting tufa towers along that stretch right there.
Yes. Yep. And, those lakes were filled, like Lake Bonneville during the glacial age, mm-hmm. Lake Lahontan in Nevada, all those valleys were filled with freshwater lakes. And you can still see algal mounds from where the lake water receded. There were algal mounds out in those freshwater lakes. You can still see those.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really cool. So
road tripping?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you want to lead you should lead a road trip. Yes. Here's what we're gonna do. WTGS. You're gonna lead the field trip. We're gonna go to Las Vegas. We're gonna go to Burning Man. We're gonna go see where your PhD was, and then we're all coming back to Midland.
You got a deal. I'll do it.
You'll lead the trip. PhD, structural geologist.
We'll put it together. We're putting this together.
Okay, maybe a PBE trip.
Maybe a PBE trip.
Okay, so before we get into your presentation, which you're going to doctor us up on kind of imagery and applying that to structural geology, which is going to be fascinating for the second part of the show, the drill down segment.
Okay.
How did you even get to become a geoscientist? Your parents were geoscientists. How did you even get down this?
My dad was a geologist.
Oh, cool.
And after World War II, he got his master's at SMU, and he taught at what became University of Texas at Arlington. It was a community college. He taught there for several years. Then he went to work for the oil industry right here in Midland. And so I lived here until I was 5 years old. And after that, he went back to the community college in Arlington. It became Arlington State College, and then it became UT Arlington. And he became eventually the chair of the department. So by the time I was in undergraduate school, he was the chairman of the department, but I wanted to be a geologist. And so I was in my dad's department, and it was interesting.
Wow.
I was going to say, that must have been a very interesting dynamic.
It was. People would say, well, you got it so easy, your dad will give you all the answers. And I would say, no, he won't even let me ask him questions.
Figure it out.
He said, you can do it yourself.
Wow. It's just like any geologist, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you always have a fascination with imagery and satellites and
I got interested in photogeology before they really had satellite imagery,
Right.
or just right about the same time that they started having civilian satellite imagery in 1972. It's when they launched the first Landsat satellite. And in 1973, I took a photogeology class from Calvin Miller, the self-proclaimed best photogeologist in the world, and he was right.
Self-proclaimed.
Self-proclaimed.
He really was the best photogeologist
You got to
in
be
the
confident.
world.
That's the thing.
Is this where you set the glasses up and then you sit there and you look over the
in
top
stereo.
of them? Yeah.
That we
Okay.
did that, but he got us a Landsat image. In fact, of the mountains in Oklahoma, the folded mountains up in Oklahoma, and so that was really the first time I fell in love with satellite imagery. So when I went to graduate school, I wanted to use satellite imagery to map structures. And I followed through with that in my PhD.
Absolutely love it. Okay, let's check out this presentation and then see where we go.
All right.
Okay, I think I need the
I'll
mouse
let you take the
now.
wheel.
All right.
Okay. Well, I wanted to start out with a really exposed structure type of satellite imagery interpretation. And this is some work I did when I worked for Exxon Research in Houston. And that was my first job after I graduated with my PhD. And so this was about 5 or 6 years after I started working for them. Exxon USA got a lease to explore in the Arkoma Basin. And so that we were looking at this area right here, and it's in front of the Ouachita Thrust. And I know that's a Q, just ignore that. It should be an O. So this was their lease area. And they didn't have good geologic maps. Surprisingly, there's still states in the U.S. that don't have good large-scale geologic maps. So they had a little bit of seismic, and I can sort of show you what they had. This is a satellite image that I was able to use. And so the Oklahoma border is right over here, and this is the Ouachita Thrust front down here. So this is out in the Arkoma Basin, and they had these two seismic lines shown in green. Their lease area was right up here, and you'll notice that it's kind of a uniform brown color, and everything around it looks kind of boxy and bright. That's all private land. This is an Army base. So they leased this from the Army, and the Army leased it to them just, in good faith, And then they told them that, oh, by the way, you can't really do field work in there because it's a former bombing range, so it won't be safe. So they couldn't really go out there to map these structures. And if you look at this structure, the Washburn anticline, it looks like an anticline, like a doubly plunging anticline, but it's kind of funny looking. It's kind of off center.
Right.
And if you notice, some of this bedding comes around, and where the dip reverses, you've actually got a fault cutoff right there.
Yeah, I was going to say that is so sharp.
And then the same thing here, this bedding comes around into a fault cutoff.
So just to kind of back up a second, was the Marathon of Ouachita in this area considered, in the Permian, we consider it thin-skinned out here. Is it still considered thin-skinned up in the Arkoma Basin?
Well, I'll let you look at the seismic, and you tell me what you think. And you can look at the model, and it's going out into the Foreland Basin, and there's normal faults out there. Mm-hmm. So we have thrusts that are ramping up over these pre-existing normal faults.
Okay.
And so there is basement interference. So it's not perfectly thin-skinned.
Okay.
No, I think you'll like what you see here.
I'm excited.
So they asked us if we could make a good structural geologic map from the imagery. And I had just come off of doing some mapping in Papua New Guinea along a thrust front. And I said, oh, yeah, I'll give this to me. I want this one. This is mine.
I'll take one for the team, guys.
And so I was thrilled. And I really liked the way this looked. It looked really interesting. So this is the seismic of the two seismic lines. This is a shorter seismic line. And so this is north. And you can see the dip coming off of that anticlinal structure. And then you can just see where it's starting to turn over here. Mm-hmm. But in the middle here, they had no resolution. Remember, this is seismic that was shot in probably the late 70s, early 80s. So we're it's not up to par for what we would see now. And so they had some well control. They knew they had some stacked up thrust sheets out here. They had no idea what was happening in here.
I was going to say, it almost looks like you can see thrust sheets right below where your mouse is right there. It's just kind of...
Oh, yeah. Out in here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the mic, Skip.
And
sorry.
And so, so they had all these thrusts coming in, and then they literally had them coming almost vertically to the surface in their first interpretation.
Okay.
And that's not good. I'll figure out which way to turn this to get it to go the right direction here in a minute. This is the other seismic line, and it shows the whole anticlinal structure. So here they knew they had stacked up thrust sheets. They had a series of thrusts coming in from the south. But over here, these beds didn't appear to really be affected by thrusting. And in here, they were trying to bring all those thrust sheets together and sort of pop out at the surface here. That's not a good model. That doesn't really work. And so since I'd worked in the front of the thrust in Papua New Guinea, I had an idea of what I thought this actually was. I thought it was a case where they were forming what's alternatively called a delta zone, or a kind of a structure that is built up where the thrust sheet comes in and splits open the sedimentary section out in the foreland basin, and it sort of wedges its way in here. And then the next thrust sheet comes in and you start stacking up thrust sheets, and it's an antiform. And this feature right here is called the back thrust.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and when you look at the ends of the Washburn anticline, you're seeing that back thrust cutting off the thrust sheet. So I took this model to them and I said, let's consider if you could interpret your seismic to look like this. Would that fit with your well control, and would that allow you to understand what's going on in that area in the seismic where the resolution was so terrible? Mm-hmm. And they stared at it and they stared at it and they said, I've never seen anything like this before. And I said, well, I have. So just
take my word for it.
Just let's go with this. And so they did, and they reinterpreted everything. So this is the actual structural map. And the back thrust is coming right through here. And there's some minor faulting as you go off into this syncline. And you can see we can map the thrust based on all these bedding terminations. It's really pretty easy. It's very straightforward photogeologic mapping. And so that's one end. That's the west end coming to pinch out this structure. And you can go through the center and all the way over to the east end. And finally here you've just got an anticline. So you've got a beautiful structure with stacked up reservoir sequences, and so they started putting in the location of the faults that they could get off of my geologic map, and it enabled them to reinterpret their well log cross sections and match up everything and fit it into this new model. And there is some faulting up in here, but basically this back thrust solved all their problems.
Wow.
And it allowed them to interpret the seismic as well. And so, this is the foreland basin, older structuring, and these are the thrust sheets coming up. Wow. And there's your delta structure or triangle zone. And so this worked really well. They were able to decide how they wanted to treat this prospect and where they wanted to drill. And so this was their model. And they decided the first well they wanted to drill was right here. And this is from a paper that came out at about the same time. Other people were figuring out something very similar. So that's sort of an example that I wanted to share with you guys of integrating different kinds of data, the well logs, the seismic, and the faulting from the surface, because sometimes you don't have good resolution near the surface, but if you have exposed structures, you can map it really clearly and project it down into your seismic.
Right.
So, you're talking about your sponsoring company making the data available.
Yeah.
Use all the data you've got, including the surface.
Oh,
you know, don't ignore that. Even if you're in some place where it's pretty low relief at the surface and very low dips, you'd be surprised, and I hope I can convince you there's a lot that you can see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've run across that already in my career. So you're telling TGS to go out there and buy some imagery.
I don't know. You don't really need to buy the imagery now. There's so much of it that's free, and it's so easy to access and so easy to process. In your GIS, QGIS or ArcGIS, whatever you're using, it's really easy. So the other things that we were looking at when I was at Exxon were what we called buried and obscured structures. So we were just looking at structures that slap you in the face. You can't miss it. You've got a fault cut off. You map a fault. If you're going into sedimentary basins, and we were looking at a lot of frontier sedimentary basins, we did the whole Andean foreland region in 1988 and 1989, and so we were looking at these basins that had really never been mapped or explored before, and now are completely drilled up. So we were looking at exposed structures where you can just see it right at the surface, but as they begin to get eroded and buried and obscured, you start having to look for clues to what's going on in the subsurface. And when you get out into the middle of a basin and you have 10,000 feet of sedimentary section on top of the actual structures, then you can run into some problems if you can't recognize what's going on. And so, if you just have completely flat-lying sediments and you erode through them with streams, this is the kind of thing that you see. And so if you look around the Permian Basin and you look in the valleys and the stream drainages, you'll see what looks kind of like layer cake geology. It's really pretty simple. And this is very, very straightforward. The first thing you learn in photogeology is how to interpret this. So if you have a sedimentary basin, it's got a thick sedimentary cover, and your basement's buried pretty deeply, and it hasn't really been reactivated for a long time, you might not get a lot of surface expression. But if there has been differential compaction or reactivation of any of the structures, sometimes even inversion of the structures, even if you've got pretty flat-lying sedimentary units on top of all that, you're going to get some surface expression. So that's kind of the model that we were working with, and this is actually representing the Paris Basin. And in the Paris Basin, there had been some reactivation, some inversion.
Where's the Paris Basin?
Around Paris.
Around Paris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Really, I'm sorry, not Paris, Texas.
Yeah.
So the Paris Basin in France. And so we actually had some drape structures that were the result of both differential compaction and some minor inversion. And what happens is you get fracturing that is going to be parallel with the edges of these uplifted blocks, and it comes all the way to the surface, and that becomes an area of weakness. So you actually get drainages that develop that are sort of etching out these fracture zones. Yeah. And then in this very, very subtle fold on top of this drape structure, you'll get erosional anomalies where the drainages are going to show you that you're dipping away from a sort of a gentle crest. And it can be a dome or just an elongated uplift.
Yeah.
But the drainages are going to tell you a lot if you're willing to go take a look at them. And so this is the guy I worked with at Exxon was named Zev Berger, and he was a geomorphologist and also a photogeologist. And they experimented with these huge stream beds. So this is a giant shed, and this is a door that you could drive a big truck into. Oh, wow. So you can see the size of this stream bed. And what they did was they put an inflatable big rubber pad on the floor, and then they covered it with sand, and then they tilted the whole thing towards us, and then they rained on it. They inflated that bag underneath the sand to make a very subtle structure, and then they let the rain fall, and the water ran across the surface, and it created this drainage. So the water's flowing down, it reaches that little lump, and it flows around it, and then it comes back together. So that's a kind of a classic drainage anomaly that you would see for that kind of structure. And then on the top of it, we've got drainages that are going out radially from the center, draining off of it. And so to make it a little bit more interesting, they put these pads in between blocks to make them have sharp edges so that they were like fault-bounded blocks. And they did the same thing, and they ended up with linear drainages that mimicked the edges of these block uplifts.
That's awesome.
So, this is kind of experimental proof of what we're looking at the surface. So he came up with these models, and Zev has written a book about oil exploration using imagery, and I'll pump that for him. And so he came up with some of these different kinds of drainage anomalies that you would expect, radial drainage anomalies where you have a structural high in the subsurface. So if you have basement domes, broad anticlines, you'll get the kind of radial drainage anomalies. If you have a sharper edge here, you'll develop these strike-oriented streams that are mimicking the edges of the uplifted blocks. And if you have topography that is really kind of severely eroded, where you have an uplift and you've got fractures associated with it, you'll end up breaching out this topography, and you'll have sort of an inverted topography. You have a topographic low over the structural high. So these are just a variety of different things that you could see. So we were working again with Exxon USA, and they wanted us to take a look out in West Texas here in the Valverde Basin. And so they gave us a pretty big study area to do the drainage analysis and see if we could see anything interesting. And so just as sort of a area where we knew we had some data. There was some drill data. There was gravity and magnetics. They had some good data that we could actually use. This is one of the drainage anomalies that we sort of used to build a model around. So this is the Pecos River. Pecos River's coming down in this direction, and it's making this big swing around and then coming back into its original orientation. And this river is also making a swing around. And so we've really got the concentric drainage here. And then you'll see that there's sort of a structural high area here, and everything drains radially away from it. So this is from the Texas Watershed Mapper. The Texas Watershed Mapper, or Texas Watershed Viewer, is something that is the Texas Department of Parks and Wildlife put it together, and anybody can open this on the internet, and it's in ArcGIS, and it actually covers the whole world, but they've highlighted it for Texas watersheds. So if you zoom in, you get a higher resolution imagery. That was Landsat imagery, 30-meter resolution. This is some higher resolution imagery, and you can just see the drainage. It just is that much easier to see.
So the large river that's making that loop,
that's the Pecos.
And is that the toe of the Central Basin platform?
That is, Cool. Isn't that the Central Basin platform?
Yeah. I mean, that's a kind of a funky drawing of it. I think that's a little old school.
I think so. I think you're right. This is from like 1986.
But it certainly does something like that. Yeah. It kind of wrenches over like that. Yeah,
wraps around.
that is so cool.
That is awesome.
But you can see some of these linear features that are probably related to fractures or fault boundaries on the underlying basement, not basement, but the deeper structures.
Yeah.
So, and you zoom in and you know, we were mapping at this kind of resolution. And so we mapped this huge area, and we gave the maps to Exxon USA, and then we never heard a thing from them. That's okay. They didn't need us anymore. So this is kind of the model. And again, this is just a sketch. And it's probably out of date. But at the time, there was poor seismic resolution. And so what we had down here was the kind of structure, one of the kind of structures that it was being drilled. And then this is a drape structure over this deeper structure. And you can actually, that's what you're seeing at the surface, is that gentle drape of these almost flat-lying units at the surface. And we hiked around out there trying to measure dips, and oh my gosh, it was barely dipping at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's got to be
But
pretty
I was going to
rough.
say, you're really trying to balance your brunton out there, just trying your best.
No, it was interesting. We stayed in Ozona, and it was an interesting town. We were staying at some
the
little motel,
Pecos.
and I was waiting for Zev to come over for dinner in the bar, which was the only place to eat. So I'm standing out in the parking lot doing nothing, just standing there, and this couple that had been having a very good time came out, and this guy took a look at me, and he looked me up and down, and he turned to his girlfriend and he said, "Beat her up."
What?
And I went, "What?" It was interesting. It was fun. She didn't beat me up. She said, "Nah." I thought, all right.
What?
Glad we're on the same page.
So
Good day.
this was really kind of our preliminary geologic model for Crockett County, West Texas. That this would be the kind of thing that you could see at the surface that might be a guide to what was going on the subsurface. So basically, that's my presentation.
Cool.
And I think at this point you said we would go to the viewer.
Yeah, we'll go into the drill down section and drill down segment of the show.
And there's actually a link here, but for some reason
Hey, I can't
it's in
see
a clear font that you can't see. So, but you can.
It's a secret link.
It's if you Google Texas Watershed Viewer,
It'll take
it'll
us there,
pull
yeah.
you right up. But I think
We
this
have
will.
the website up.
Oh,
yeah.
you already do. That's right. So I didn't need to even open that. So you already had the Texas Watershed
Yeah, there
Viewer
it
up.
is. There it is. Okay, so we're about to go live with the drill down segment of PBE podcast. First time live with the cameras in the studio with Rebecca Dodge. So we'd like to take a minute with the drill down segment and provide the opportunity for companies to sponsor the drill down segment. So as we drill down in the show, we also drill down to our reservoirs. And we do that with mud logging companies, wireline companies, casing companies. What else do we do? Coring companies. What kind of companies can help with the drill down segment?
I mean, just
That's
any
pretty much
drilling
it.
company in general.
Drilling companies, yeah. Drill bit technology, right? Any of those kinds of things want to help with the show and want to sponsor this segment as we drill down now specifically into the Texas Watershed Viewer with Rebecca Dodge. We will do that on the next show. But with that said, I think we're ready to go.
I think we're ready to go.
we dive right in.
All right. So, if you know a specific place that you want to go here, try Crockett County. Okay, so it's going to try to highlight the watershed for us, but the area that we were looking at is right here.
Oh, yeah.
Holy smokes, you can see that.
So, it really does stand out. But there's other things in here that stand out as well. For example, look at this feature. And the scale down here, I think this was...
I think it's 10 now.
Okay, 10. So whatever this feature is, it's very, very long and very straight.
Yeah.
And it has that typical kind of a dogleg pattern that is associated with high angle vertical faulting, normal or reverse faulting, very high angle faulting.
Which is all over the Permian Basin.
Which is all over the Permian Basin. And so...
Especially in this area. I mean, with the Marathon of Ouachita front just coming through.
Yep.
So that kind of feature, if you were to look at the gravity and magnetics, at the well log coverage, at the seismic, you would probably find that there is a very large structure associated with that. And if you zoom in on this, you'll see all the wells.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll
yeah.
see that on one side of this fault, there's quite a bit of production. Over here, not so much. So this could be structurally controlling and localizing reservoirs.
Right.
And so this is the kind of thing that if you have questions about your data, and there's something that you can't quite figure out. You're wondering if there's another piece that's missing. It doesn't hurt to look at the surface data.
Mm-hmm.
You might really find something that would be an aha moment. And I did some work over in Eddy County in New Mexico. And
Let's go. Let's take it to Eddy.
Let's go for a trip.
Eddy County, New Mexico.
Oh, yeah. What is that? Caprock or whatever right there? That really tan to...
Yeah. And I'm not going to be able to find this. I shouldn't have brought it up because I didn't look at it before I went.
There are the Guads.
Yep. There's...
Right there.
And if we zoom out, we can find White Sands over here. The Malpais, the lava flow. Have you ever been out there?
No.
What the hell?
What is...
It's a lava flow. It's a very young, very recent, 1,000 years old.
1,000 years old?
It's extremely recent. And when you're walking on it, you almost think your feet could be burning. It looks like it just happened yesterday. It's Bohoihoi lava, just gorgeous, basaltic. You got to go.
Wow. Love it. Yeah, what is that huge feature right there that runs down the middle of Chavez? And they call it Caprock, right? The surface feature?
Oh, what is that called? I can't remember.
It's like on a line.
But this is we're aren't we in the Rio Grande Rift here?
I think that's to the left or to the west.
The Rio Grande Rift is over here.
There.
I'm not sure what would be controlling that.
Is that the beginning of the Pecos River?
Oh, right. The Pecos River runs through Artesia, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the beginning of the Pecos River.
Okay.
Because Artesia is somewhere in here between Roswell and Carlsbad.
So what's interesting about the Guads to me, and maybe you have a way to help me with this structurally, why does it seem like the Guadalupe Mountains haven't been rocked as much as the Laramide seems to have rocked the whole western side of the Permian Basin? Like they're saying it's...
That's a good question. Now, here, pick out, show me where the Guadalupes.
Yeah, this is the outcrop of the Guads right here.
Oh, okay.
Right on the border.
Yeah. Oh, of course,
and
yeah.
that classic Capitan Reef. Yeah, so this is the front of it. This is all just the Capitan Reef, right? Mm-hmm. This is all just 90 or 70 degree angle reef. But when you look at the whole western side of the Permian Basin, they're saying 5,000-6,000 feet of uplift, and when you do a structure map on this side of the Permian Basin, it's just the structure just climbs out of the basin to the west. But the Guads seem like they haven't been rocked. I mean, we study them and we draw that as if it's pretty flat. Why didn't they get moved?
What underneath them acted as a buttress to protect them as the compression came in?
I don't know. I guess there has to be something.
There had to be some sort of buttress there to keep that from being deformed.
Interesting.
I'm trying to think of what the basement architecture is there, because I don't think the minimum travels that far.
Yeah, it's coming through here, right?
It's coming through there. I think it's. Oh man,
can you see the gravity Abilene minimum? What is it called?
Yeah, the Abilene gravity minimum.
Abilene gravity minimum. Can you see that on the surface? No.
Nah,
not seeing it. What about the big North 70 West features? Nothing like that going this way?
There's some good. Let me see.
Point it out.
Let me hop on one. Because I remember reading a paper by a fellow geologist, Pat Bolden, and he mapped those lineaments using Landsat data in the Permian on the surface. Yeah, I think this is what he mapped as the Concho lineament.
Well, there are some northwest trending features that run through there that are pretty impressive.
I'm just running around right now.
That's great because you guys know the Permian Basin. Oh, and if you want to get rid of that, yeah.
This is awesome. I'm going to be just on this website after this podcast, just going everywhere that I've ever been geologically, every field trip.
Oh,
Just taking a quick
absolutely.
ride.
I think it's great. And if you get tired of looking at the county boundaries, you can just go to Imagery without the labels. To find something you
cool.
might want the labels. And they also have something called National Geographic map. You can switch the map. And in some of the areas where there's more relief, it's a shaded relief map. And it looks pretty nice. Not all the areas. It doesn't work in every area, though. So,
can you back out of that feature real quick? Can I see the mouse?
Oh, yeah. And this one is the one that shows all the oil fields, the names of the oil fields. So if you have a particular oil field that you know and want to look and see if there's some sort of surface expression of it.
What is it?
That's the Andrew Shear zone. You can see the drag folds.
Cool.
Yeah, on the northern margin of the Central Basin platform, it's kind of strange, but there's this massive right lateral shear zone.
Okay.
And opposed to all the other strike slip faults on the platform, which are considered or have been studied to be these left lateral shear. And so it just kind of pops out. And they say it's the possible Grenville front or, the axis of this massive Proterozoic batholith called the Abilene gravity minimum. But whatever it was, when the Marathon of Ouachita came in, it moved totally different to everything else on the Central Basin platform. And, I mean, that line is...
Switch to the Imagery. See if it shows up on the Imagery.
Let's kind of back out.
Kind of. You can see something that runs through there. If we zoom in a little bit, let me see. A lot of times, if you back way out, you'll see what seems to be like a lineament, and then if you start zooming in, it breaks up. But that actually makes sense because to make one of those lineaments, you have a whole series of small surface expressions that are not continuous at the surface, even if they're continuous at the subsurface. So as they work their way to the surface, it's not going to be like a knife edge. And so in one area, it might be the edge of an outcrop. In another area, it might be an actual fractured zone that's been etched out by a river. And so you have to build these things up. And so, when I do an image interpretation, I map everything that looks to me like it is geologically controlled. And then I put together a framework from that. I don't just start drawing long lines on the image to begin with. You have to
because then
build
you've already inserted that pre-existing bias, so you're going to make everything fit that. So I like that.
And then when you're working with that, you also want to look at any subsurface data that you have that can help you to control what's making that surface expression. And if there's nothing there in your subsurface data and you've got really good coverage, you don't have anything to support it. You don't have anything to support it. You're not going to you can't always be right no matter how you're interpreting your data. But the more data you integrate.
As long as you can build onto that story, that's the important part with every piece of data that comes in. And not neglect data because it doesn't fit the story.
Yeah, that's true. And so... this area is so intensely drilled now, but there is imagery available from this area of this quality back to 1982 with 30-meter resolution and back to 1972 with 80-meter resolution, which is not wonderful, but it's still if you look at the area around Odessa and Midland over 10-year time spans, and you see the drilling increase, and recently increased dramatically. You can go pretty far back, almost 40 years, with really good resolution imagery for this kind of mapping.
So, do you know how up to date this imagery is?
I don't know the exact date of this imagery, but what I do know is that it has been updated within the past couple of years.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I know that because I developed a bunch of teacher training materials using this website. And I especially developed one over the Monaghan Sand Dunes State Park. And so if you look at Monaghan Sandhills State Park now, there's a lot of wells over here. And when the imagery that I used, I think 3 years ago when I did it, there weren't that many wells. So I know the imagery is 2 or 3 years old, but this Sandhills area is just fascinating, and the imagery from one time period to another, you can see the dunes moving.
Cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. So I don't know if there are other areas in the Permian Basin you'd like to take a look at on this, or other.
I'm going to invite everybody to take a picture of something, and then we'll send it to you and get your interpretation. We'll talk about it on future shows, put it on the website. Definitely. I think this is absolutely awesome. And I've actually used this at work. We had a surface feature. And
good.
Then Seismic came in. I'm like, holy smokes, that goes all the way down to the basement.
Yeah. You'd be surprised how that basement structure reflects through over 10,000 feet of so-called flat-lying sedimentary units.
Yeah.
We used to joke about it, the Princess and the Pea. Do you remember that fairy tale? No, you guys are too young for the Princess and the Pea. Oh, never mind.
No, this is super, super cool and very useful for sure.
And it's your tax dollars at work. This is the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department put this together using Esri, an Esri site, and so if you're interested, you can go anywhere in the world on this viewer. Yeah. And I know what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you the Washburn anticline.
Oh, from the beginning of the presentation.
From the beginning of the presentation.
Oh, wow, look at that.
So it's up in this area. I just need to zoom in a little bit to be able to see it. There were very, very few wells there. And if you look at it now, there she is. She's a beauty. There's the Washburn anticline, and that's
a spring picture.
That's the density of development there now.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, all these are wells.
Right. How deep? They're drilling Woodford?
So they're drilling through the back thrust into those deeper.
Yeah, in some cases they're drilling through the back thrust. The back thrust, I think, is coming right through here.
Okay.
And so some of these look like these are on the back side of the back thrust. And some of them they were actually drilling down into unfaulted foreland basin sediments that as you go farther south were caught up in the thrusts.
Okay.
So they were drilling through the thrusts. Yeah.
Always a solid plan.
That is.
So it makes I've told people for years and years that the area that I was mapping, in this area had been heavily developed, but I never actually saw it until now. So I was making it up.
I mean, that sticks out like a sore thumb during spring. You could see every single one of those pads.
Yep.
Well, I guess as we end the drill down segment of our show, we thank you so much for sharing the Texas Watershed viewer with us and how you use it to interpret and
Can we take one last trip?
Absolutely.
We're going
Please do.
We're going out of the Permian.
Oh, snap.
We're going to Montana.
Oh, great.
Field camp.
We're going to field camp. I just need to see Block Mountain.
Oh, good.
Sweet.
You can type it in and you can maybe search for it. Look at that.
There it is. Where Skips lived for 6 weeks. What was it?
Oh, look. Lovely.
Holy smokes.
This was my favorite mapping adventure of all time.
No kidding.
It was just
Field camp, man.
it was mind blowing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, we called them the racetracks. And then so you had multiple sections of like Cretaceous sediments just stacked on top of one another. And it was you had these massive overturned anticlines and a massive overturned synclines. Sheesh. And this area in here is what they called the rat's nest. So when you start mapping from the west and you move east, and you gain confidence pretty quick. You're like, okay, this section's a little extra thick. Oh, well, we can throw a thrust in here. And then all of a sudden you get to this rat's nest, and you're like, I don't know how any of these things got here. It was just, and
what the heck?
I'm not sure if it was through the state or if it was through the government, but they declared this as a geologic study area. So for the future, it could be preserved for field camps to go to and map.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Well, when I did my field camp down in the Marathon Basin, we were able to get on a lot of the private ranches. But shortly after that, all the ranches shut off the geology programs. Yeah. But boy, you talk about mapping some fascinating places.
I'd to see that too.
These field camps. Yeah.
Okay, that was the one
field camp. I'm doing it.
We're doing it. We're doing it. We're just doing field camps now.
Okay.
Picacho State Park. Picacho State. Hey.
Maybe
recreation area?
No, it's California.
It's in Arizona?
Yeah. 310 to Yuma. Huh.
You're right on the border there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Am I going to be able to find this?
Ooh, nice. That's interesting.
So what's going on there? Give us the breakdown.
So if I can find it, so this is the river we camped on for sure. We'd walk through these washes, but we mapped one of these outcrops. Man, it's got to be this one, I would think. Gosh, I just remember so much more color than this. Ooh. This is all just one.
It looks pretty colorful.
No. It was like you could see where the old lake was. It was a totally different color. A bunch of hydrothermal activity. We basically did a geochemical study on the fault itself, and we did outside the fault gouge, in the fault, and then on the other side of the fault, and the hydrothermal fluids were totally changing the chemistry of the rock. And what was really cool was it was a massive thrust, and what was poking through this young volcanic rock was ocean floor. Yeah, on the state line of Arizona and California.
That's got to be crazy, just walking around and being like, oh, where do these ultramafics come from?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it was quite. I mean, at the time you're an undergrad, you're going, I barely keep up with what we're even doing. And it's on my wall in my office at the house, man. I look at it all the time like, I can't believe I did that. It's awesome. But there's a big copper mine out here. I think it's copper, maybe gold. I mean, you can see the hydrothermal alteration.
Yeah.
It's right there. Man, that's not the outcrop, but it's one of these. I'm kind of bummed I can't find. I should have researched this before the show. Anyway,
we're kind of freestyling right now. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to your field camp?
Oh, I was going to go to Marathon.
Cool.
Marathon Basin.
You missed the A.
Oops. Sorry.
Oh,
still picked it up.
Marathon, Texas.
Marathon, Texas. We're close. Yeah, there we go. There she is.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got to map all that?
Oh, we went to various different
localities.
anticlines. Yeah, various different locations.
Oh my
But I mean,
gosh.
just fabulous geology.
Look at that.
Just incredible.
This is how we plan field trips from now on.
Nice. I like it.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, let's see. Let's see if we can find Fort Pena, Colorado. If I could only type. Okay, the Fort Pena, Colorado State Park has this folding in it, and it's so beautifully exposed. If you want to just go walk around in the middle of these folds, go to Fort Pena, Colorado Park. It's...
Gosh, it almost looks like a flower. It's incredible.
It is. I mean, and this is the park, and you can just walk around through these folds. We mapped it in that area.
And that whole area is still state land?
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much of it is, but a lot of it is in the park.
Okay.
So, you can just walk around here. And I mean, look at this stuff. This is just fascinating. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Beautifully faulted. Look at that. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I think we wrapped up the drill down segment of the show.
I think so.
And now it's to completion.
That was a lot of fun.
Yes, that was fascinating.
Thank you guys for hands-on participating. That's what I was hoping for. I wanted you to go to your own places.
Okay, and now we move right into the completion segment of the show. Again, opportunities for completion tools, fracking tools. Let's see, wireline tools that can go lateral. Any kind of completion.
Yeah, any new completions technology.
Yep.
Whether it's some sort of bio or some new special sand.
I like that. Yeah. Tertiary recovery, enhanced oil recovery ideas. I like that. Any of those types of folks, we'd love to give you a shout out on the show during the completion segment of the PBE podcast. And with that, to sum it all up, what is Rebecca Dodge up to now?
I retired from Midwestern State University in August. I'm still teaching online for them.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. But mainly what I'm doing now is I'm doing earth science teacher education. There's a real need for earth science teachers to have access to training. And, we can offer earth science at the high school level in Texas, but it's very rarely offered in high schools because the teachers don't feel prepared to teach it.
Oh, wow.
And so that's my focus right now, is helping high school teachers get the basic fundamental background to be able to teach that class. So I just got a grant from the AAPG Foundation to support that.
Nice.
So in Southwest Section, in every member society, including West Texas Geological Society, we're going to be trying to recruit 3 teachers from each society, and we're going to pay their tuition to take a semester-long, in-depth earth science education class, a college-level class.
Cool.
That is specifically designed to prepare them to teach
high school or
middle school earth science.
Wow.
And so Monday and Tuesday I was calling around to all the member societies, and I'm already getting callbacks saying, no problem, we'll help pay the tuition, we'll help you to recruit teachers.
I bet, yeah.
So I'm really excited. I think that we're going to have a really good program. We're going to do it over a couple of years. Then the plan is to expand it to the other sections of AAPG and get them to get it in the high schools. If you don't have earth science after middle school, when you're trying to decide to go to college, it rarely occurs to kids,
right.
I could be a geologist.
Right, I can make a living out of this.
Yeah.
Right.
I know for myself, the last earth science class that I took before college was 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Took rocks for jocks.
Boom. And here you are now.
And here we are now.
That's how we met. We met through the youth education program.
That's right, which I love. The West Texas Geological Society is doing great things with that youth education.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Fifth graders can have some wild questions.
Oh, I had so much fun. I went to 5 classes.
Wow.
And I usually got about 10 minutes into my presentation and the kids started asking questions.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And I spent the rest of the presentation just answering their questions.
Oh, man.
And the teachers would say, oh, we never have time for me to answer questions in class. So the kids, they loved this.
They loved it.
And I loved it because just the questions, like you said, the questions they ask are great.
Oh,
in my opinion,
goodness.
that's when the best learning happens, right? Because they're curious. They want to know more, right?
Yep.
They want to learn. It's not they're staring at a board and you're
That's right.
going through a PowerPoint and you memorize this.
I went back to 3 of those same classes the next week and did a presentation on natural hazards that have damaged Texas state parks.
Huh.
And the kids loved it. Of course, it was fires and floods and, hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. But it's earth science and it helped them to learn stuff.
Yeah.
So
every year it's very very gratifying to a fifth grader. They just come up and just like, thank you so much for teaching. It's cool. One of the best questions I got, I think, out of all the years I've done, almost 5 years, I think I've done it now. The end of the program and people are asking questions. And this class in particular is getting a little live. We start talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I mean, they're already understanding the concepts of this stuff. So let's talk about it. Let's get weird. And one of the girls raises her hand and she says, "Are we just talking animals?"
Yes.
And the teacher jumps up. "Oh, the questions are done for today."
And on that note,
thanks so much for coming out.
Yeah.
But very, very creative. One kind of trapped me as we always talk about how you increase temperature and pressure as you get deeper into the earth. And the center of the earth is solid and it's really hot. And the kid at the end says, "Well, have you ever been there?" And I'm like, "No, we don't have any equipment that can withstand that kind of pressure, and we can't get there." "And how do you know what it's made out of?" Like, all right, you little fifth grader.
you want to go down this rabbit hole with me? Are you ready for this?
But they're so incredibly smart. They're so incredibly smart. Fifth grade. It's crazy. I have a 7-month at home, and I'm looking at her while she's figuring out how to eat, and she totally understands way more than she can function. Right? She can't speak, but she's totally understanding things already. I could see it. She's plotting on me.
Oh, she's going to take over the world. I love it.
Well, with that, what else do we have for finishing up the show with Rebecca Dodge? What do you think about the local societies here? You've been in West Texas now and a part of the societies for how long?
Since August. I started going to meetings, I guess, probably in September. I've enjoyed the meetings, and I've really enjoyed working with the youth activities group. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to getting involved in more. I'm enjoying it.
Okay, cool. No, that's good feedback for sure. I think we do pretty good. A lot of lunch-ins.
Yeah. A lot of good talks. A lot of good talks. They've been really good this year. Yeah. I'll admit that.
Yeah. The future of oil and gas industry. The future of oil and gas.
Well, I think of it from the perspective of my students because, I'm so recently come off of Midwestern had undergraduate and they had started a master's program.
Cool.
So I think of it in terms of bringing students from the undergraduate into the master's program and talking to them about careers. And I'm also visiting geoscientists for AAPG. So I go to universities and talk to them, and I talk to them about careers in all kinds of careers in geosciences, but specifically in oil and gas. And I tell them, you have a future in the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry is going to be around for decades.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The transition towards renewable fuels, we are at the very baby steps beginning of that transition. And it's going to take decades to make the transition, and there'll still be the need for petroleum for so many other products. Right now, it's so heavily focused on transportation.
Sure.
80-90% of the transportation relies on petroleum.
Sure.
And that can change over time, not tomorrow, but over time. But still, it's the feedstock for fertilizers, for plastics, for medicines, for so many things.
I think the alternative energy is going to be healthy competition for petroleum.
I do too.
And in the sense that it's going to force petroleum to innovate unlike they've ever innovated before, right? And I think it's just the technology and the ideas are just going to be over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, hopefully sooner for the oil and gas industry. Yeah, there's so much hope for growth in the oil and gas industry. So we need the young minds with the new ideas more than ever right now.
Absolutely.
And we do. We have an incredible growth in front of us as we're only getting, even in conventional reservoirs, are getting 15 to 20% primary recovery. It's not until you start water flooding and CO2 and these other ideas to move the hydrocarbon around that it gets better. So how can we put that wellbore in the ground and immediately get to 80 to 100% recoveries, and not even talk about unconventionals as bad as 5% recovery factors right now? We can't just drill. We have to drill less, increase recovery factors. That's our future, and we have to do it tomorrow.
Well, I think there's a great future for all. If you're on the technology side of it, if you're on the exploration side of it, production, development, wherever you're at, there's potential. And I just went to AAPG in San Antonio, and there were so many young people there. Mm-hmm. It was thrilling to see that the industry is drawing in the smart, sharp, eager young people. And I loved it. I love to see it.
Yeah, that is really, really great. I think that's it.
I think that's good. That was
Thank
awesome.
you. That was fun. I enjoyed it.